They say marriage is built on trust. But what happens when that trust asks for something so strange, so unexpected, something that makes you question everything you thought you knew about love, commitment, even yourself? I remember the night like it just happened. We weren't fighting. We weren't even distant, not in an obvious way. We were sitting on the couch, quiet, late at night, the kind of silence that isn't peaceful, but heavy. The TV was on, but we weren't watching it. Just background noise to fill the void that had grown between us. And then, out of nowhere, he turned to me, looked me right in the eyes, and said something that made my whole body freeze. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't angry. It was just honest. Too honest. He had a wish. Fantasy, I guess. But the moment I heard it, something inside me cracked open. Not because it was shocking, though it was, but because, deep down, I realized something much scarier. Part of me didn't want to say no. I wish I could say I stood up for myself. I wish I could say I laughed and said, "Are you crazy?" But I didn't. I sat there, still as stone, as my husband, my partner of almost 2 decades, asked me to do something that would change us forever. And I said yes. Not because I wanted to hurt him. Not because I wanted to betray the vows we made. But because I was so tired of feeling invisible. You ever feel like you're fading in your own life? Like everyone around you sees you, but no one really sees you? That was me. So yeah, I said yes. And everything that came after. The lies I told myself. The fire it lit in places I thought were long dead. The guilt. The silence. The unexpected tenderness. The pain I never meant to cause. All of it started with that moment. This isn't just a story about infidelity. It's a story about desperation. About loneliness. About what happens when people stop speaking the same language, but still sleep in the same bed. I've never told anyone this before. Not my sister. Not my best friend. Not even the person who knows me best, because I'm not sure they do anymore. But I'm telling you, because maybe you've been there. Maybe you're there right now. So lean in. This is the story of what happened when my husband had a wish. And I said yes. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold, where the stories cut deep and the truths hit even deeper. You don't want to miss what comes next. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was just fading. My days blurred into one another. Wake up. Make coffee. Make sure the kids had something to eat, even if they were already rushing out the door. Tidy up the kitchen. Answer emails. Fold laundry. It wasn't a bad life, not really. It was just invisible. I felt like a ghost haunting my own home. Everything around me moved. Everyone had purpose. My husband had his work. The kids had their friends, their phones, their own lives. And I just filled in the empty spaces. My name is Melissa. I'm 42. I've been married for 17 years. And from the outside, we looked like a family that had it all together. Nice house in a quiet neighborhood. 2 kids in high school. No major drama. We were the family that waved politely at neighbors, hosted the occasional backyard barbecue, sent out Christmas cards on time. We smiled for pictures. But inside, we hadn't touched each other in months. Not in the way that mattered. He's a good man, my husband. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. He never yelled. Never cheated. Never stayed out late or made me worry. But somewhere along the way, he stopped seeing me. He became logical about everything. Efficient. Practical. He solved problems like he was managing a project at work. Even when I cried, those rare moments when I let the ache rise to the surface, he didn't get angry. He just analyzed it. Like I was an equation to fix. Maybe you need more sleep. Why don't you take a weekend for yourself? Have you tried journaling? I used to crave his touch. Now, I craved anything that would remind me I was still here. Still human. Still desirable. The kids, well, they were always busy. Jake's 17, into sports and gaming. Emma's 15, always locked in her room talking to her friends or scrolling through social media. They love me, I know they do. But I stopped being the center of their world years ago. So I filled my time with routines. Cooking meals no one really complimented. cleaning rooms that would be messy again by nightfall, making lists, running errands, trying not to think too hard about the way my husband barely looked at me anymore. We talked, sure, about the mortgage, about the car needing a service, about what time Emma needed to be picked up from her friend's house. But we hadn't really talked in a long time. And when he asked me that night, when he told me his wish, his fantasy, that thing he'd been thinking about, I realized something. It had been so long since he'd wanted anything from me. So long since I felt like I mattered to him. That even this strange, unexpected request felt like attention. It felt like being noticed. It felt like being real again. So I said yes. And that yes, that single word, broke something open inside of me. And nothing was ever the same after that. It was his idea to plan the weekend away. A small cabin by the lake, not too far from home, but far enough to pretend like things were okay. Just the two of us. No kids. No errands. No silent dinners or half-hearted small talk. I didn't expect much. We'd done this before, forced quality time, that felt more like obligation than connection. But still, I packed a bag. I told myself maybe this time would be different. Maybe the quiet, the water, the absence of distractions, maybe it would make us remember who we were before life swallowed us whole. The first night was uneventful. We cooked a simple dinner, sat on the porch, watched the sky turn from blue to purple. It was peaceful but distant. Like being next to a stranger you used to love. The second night, that's when it happened. We had wine with dinner. He poured me a glass like he used to, back when we were still playful. I smiled, because for a moment, it almost felt like we were ourselves again. We talked more than usual, laughed even. And then he got quiet. He was staring into the fire when he said it. There's something I've thought about for a while. His voice was calm, measured. I looked at him, curious. He didn't look nervous. He looked sure. He didn't dance around it. He didn't build up to it with soft, cautious steps. He just said it, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. He said he wanted to try something. Something new. Something different. He said he wanted to watch me. With someone else. I laughed. Of course I laughed. It sounded absurd. Ridiculous. But he didn't laugh with me. He just kept staring into the fire, the glass of wine untouched in his hand. And that's when I realized. He wasn't joking. He meant it. He had thought about it. Planned it. Wanted it. My stomach dropped. Not from fear, but from confusion. What was this? A trap? A twisted test? Had he stopped loving me so completely that this was his way of saying, do whatever you want, I don't care anymore? But no. He explained it like it was a gift. Like he was offering me something. Freedom. Exploration. He told me he missed the fire in my eyes. Said he'd noticed how I'd been fading. Said he wanted to see me lit up again, even if it wasn't by him. I didn't know what to say. I should have been hurt. I should have been offended. But instead, I just sat there, stunned. And the worst part? A part of me didn't hate the idea. Not because I wanted to betray him. Not because I wanted someone else. But because I wanted to feel something. Anything. I missed being wanted. I missed being touched. I missed feeling like a woman, not just a wife or a mother or a roommate sharing bills and silence. I looked at him across that flickering firelight, and I saw the man I married, and also the man I no longer knew. And in that moment, the ground beneath our marriage shifted. Not with a crash, but with a quiet, careful crack. The kind of crack that doesn't look dangerous until one day, the whole foundation falls apart. The days after that conversation felt like walking through fog. Thick, heavy, disorienting. I couldn't shake his words. They wrapped around my mind like vines, tightening a little more every time I tried to ignore them. He hadn't brought it up again. He acted like everything was normal. As if he hadn't just cracked open a door neither of us could close again. I kept waiting for him to say, forget I said anything. Or maybe laugh it off, blame it on the wine. But he didn't. And I didn't ask. Instead, I replayed it. Over and over. The way he said it so calmly. So certain. Like he'd been living with the idea quietly for a long time. I kept wondering, was it a trap? Some twisted test to see how far I'd go? Was he daring me to cheat so he'd have an excuse to leave? Or was it real? Was he really so far removed from me, so detached, that the thought of me being with someone else didn't hurt him? It excited him? That thought alone made something twist in my chest. I couldn't help it. My mind went to all the nights I'd reached for him in bed and he'd turned away. All the mornings he left without a kiss. All the dinners where he sat scrolling on his phone while I sat quietly across from him, pretending not to care. The birthdays he forgot. The anniversaries he remembered too late. The compliments that stopped coming. There was a time he used to pull me into his arms just because. A time he used to look at me like I was the only woman in the room. I used to feel beautiful, alive. But lately, I felt useful. Like furniture. Always there. Always dependable. Never really seen. And now, out of nowhere, he was asking me to do the one thing I thought would end a marriage. But he wasn't ending it. He was inviting it. Requesting it. I tried to rationalize it. If this is what he wanted, then maybe I wasn't betraying anyone. Right? I wouldn't be sneaking around. It wouldn't be a secret. It would be something we agreed on. But every time I thought that, something in me recoiled. This wasn't who I was. I wasn't the kind of woman who needed permission to be wanted. Was I? Late at night, I'd lie awake next to him, listening to the sound of his steady breathing, wondering if agreeing would destroy what little we had left, or if it had already been destroyed long before he ever said a word. I thought about the way he used to touch me, the way my body used to respond to him so easily. Now, even brushing shoulders in the hallway felt unfamiliar. I asked myself questions I wasn't ready to answer. Was I lonely or just tired? Did I want someone else or did I just want to be wanted? Did I still love him or was I clinging to the memory of someone he used to be? The part that scared me most wasn't that he'd asked. It was that he'd asked and I didn't feel disgusted. I didn't feel angry. I felt curious. Not about the act, but about the feeling. What would it feel like to be looked at again the way I used to be? To be touched with intention? To be seen not as a mother or a wife or a placeholder in someone else's life, but as a woman. A real woman. I kept telling myself this was wrong. That even if he'd given me his blessing, it didn't mean it wouldn't hurt. That something in us might break beyond repair. But then I'd remember how long I'd already been living with that break. We were already broken. We'd just gotten good at pretending we weren't. And in the quiet moments when the house was still, when I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back at me, I'd whisper the question to myself over and over. Was this the only way to feel wanted again? We didn't talk about it again for almost a week. Not directly, but it lingered. Every conversation, every glance had a new weight to it. Then one night, while I was folding laundry, he walked into the room and simply said, "If we're going to do this, we need to set rules." I didn't answer at first. I just stared at the shirt in my hand, the fabric suddenly foreign in my fingers. But I nodded. Slowly. We sat down that night and talked like strangers negotiating a contract. No secrets. No ongoing contact. He would be there. One time only. We wouldn't speak of it afterward unless we both wanted to. It was surreal. Like planning something intimate and destructive in the most polite way possible. But I agreed. To every condition. And then, he brought up Mark. Mark wasn't a stranger. He was someone we both knew. A friend of his from work, recently divorced. Kind. Soft-spoken. The type who always offered to help carry groceries to your car or fix things without being asked. I'd never looked at him that way before. But now, everything had changed. My husband said Mark might be open-minded. Said he trusted him. Said if it was going to be anyone, he'd feel safer knowing it was someone he respected. I wanted to protest. But I didn't. Because deep down, I was curious. And maybe, in some twisted way, relieved. There was something about Mark's quiet gentleness that didn't scare me. So, we invited him over. Just for drinks, my husband said. Nothing more. I wore a dress I hadn't touched in years. It hugged my figure in a way that made me nervous. I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. Put on perfume I'd almost forgotten I had. And when I walked downstairs, my husband looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in what felt like forever. He didn't say anything, but I saw it. Something flickered in his eyes. Mark arrived right on time. He brought wine, smiled politely, acted like it was just a normal evening. We made small talk, laughed more than we should have at silly stories. There was nothing obvious, nothing physical, but underneath every word, every glance, there was something unspoken, a current, and I felt it. In my skin, in my breath, in the way I leaned in just a little closer when Mark spoke, in the way his eyes lingered just a second too long when I left. My husband noticed. He didn't say a word, but I could feel his attention shift. He was watching, not with jealousy, but with calculation, like he was studying something he'd only ever imagined. The weeks that followed felt like I was living in someone else's body. I started dressing differently, fixing my hair even when I had nowhere to go, putting on makeup to run simple errands, smiling at strangers, smiling at myself. And Mark noticed. He'd text me after those casual visits. Nothing inappropriate, just thoughtful. Dinner was nice. You looked happy tonight. Glad we're reconnecting. Each message left me breathless. Each reply took longer to type than it should have. And my husband, he watched it all unfold. Quietly, methodically, he arranged the night. Said he'd already spoken to Mark. That they'd agreed. It would happen the following Friday, at our house, after the kids were gone for the weekend. I didn't know what to feel. I was terrified, excited, guilty, awake. I started dreaming again. Not of Mark, not exactly, but of moments. Of being touched. Of being desired. Of being wanted without being needed. The days leading up to it were unbearable. I'd walk past my husband and feel his eyes on me. Not with anger, not even resentment, but with something deeper. Something I couldn't name. Mark sent me one last message. Just 5 words. Are you sure about this? And I stared at it for a long time. Because I wasn't. Not really. But I replied anyway. Yes. The night finally came. The kids were gone. The wine was chilled. The house was too quiet. I sat on the edge of the bed, heart pounding. Mark was on his way. My husband was downstairs, waiting. And none of us, not me, not him, not Mark, were truly ready for what happened next. The knock on the door sounded louder than it should have. Or maybe it was just my heartbeat, thudding so hard in my chest that everything else felt amplified. I opened it slowly. Mark stood there. Not smiling, not nervous, just quiet. He looked at me like he wasn't sure if he should be there. And I looked back at him like I wasn't sure either. But I let him in. My husband was already sitting in the living room. He nodded at Mark. Offered him a drink. Small talk came and went like fog there, but without weight. I couldn't focus. My skin buzzed. My thoughts were scattered and sharp. I wanted to run. I wanted to stay. I wanted to be anywhere but there. And yet, nowhere else made sense. Eventually, the room got quiet. My husband stood up. Told us we didn't need to talk anymore. That we knew why we were there. And then he sat down on the armchair in the corner of the room. Watching. Still. Silent. Mark looked at me. Not demanding, not even eager. Just waiting. For my permission. I nodded. Barely. But it was enough. The first touch was soft. Like testing the temperature of water before stepping in. His hand on my arm. Then my shoulder. Then my waist. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. Until he leaned in and kissed me, slow, unsure at first, then more certain. And I let him. Everything after that became a blur of motion and sensation. I kept thinking this is happening. This is real. I'm doing this. There was something surreal about it all. Like watching someone else through a window. A version of myself I barely recognized. But then, something shifted. Not in Mark. Not even in me. In the room. The atmosphere. The weight. I felt him watching. My husband. I didn't look at him, but I felt him. His presence thick and quiet and unblinking. And then suddenly. I didn't. I looked up. The chair was empty. The silence changed. It was no longer charged. It was broken. I pulled away, sat up, heart in my throat. Mark whispered, "What's wrong?" But I was already moving. I grabbed a robe, ran down the hallway, out the front door, barefoot. The porch light flickered above me as I scanned the driveway. There, his car, parked on the far edge. Engine off. I ran to it, breath sharp in my chest. Tried the door. Locked. I knocked on the window. Soft at first. Then harder still. He didn't open it. Didn't even look at me. He just sat there, head resting against the steering wheel, shoulders shaking, body trembling. And that's when I saw it. He was crying. My husband. This man who hadn't shown real emotion in years. This man who suggested this, who planned it, who said he was okay, was sobbing in our driveway with the doors locked like he was trying to protect himself from me. I stood there, frozen, roped clutched around me like armor that wasn't working. I didn't know what to do. I knocked again, whispered his name. He didn't move. And in that moment, the weight of everything came crashing down. The rules, the planning, the logic, the way we tried to control something as messy and wild as emotion. It was all pretend. All a game we thought we could manage. But we couldn't. Because love, real love, doesn't watch. It doesn't negotiate its own replacement. It doesn't sit in the corner and stay quiet while the person you once held closest is touched by someone else. He thought he could handle it. And maybe I thought I could too. But we were both wrong. I rested my forehead against the window, eyes closed, breath fogging the glass. Inside that car was the man I had built a life with. And inside that house was the moment I had just torn that life apart. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I'd ever felt before. He didn't speak to me that night. He didn't come back inside. Eventually, sometime after midnight, I heard the car start, and then it was gone. I stayed in the living room until morning, still wearing that robe. Mark had left quietly. He didn't say much, just gave me a look I couldn't quite read. Pity, maybe? Or regret. But not judgment. I sat there, staring at nothing. Numb. Not because I didn't feel anything, but because I felt too much. The next morning, my husband came home. He didn't look at me. He didn't say a word. Just walked past me, into the bedroom, closed the door. And that's how the days went. Cold. Still. Quiet in the most violent way. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse me. He just shut down. I tried to reach for him. Tried to speak. Tried to explain, even though I didn't have the right words. "You wanted this, remember?" I said once, barely above a whisper. He looked at me then, really looked. His eyes were red, tired. And all he said was, "I didn't think it would hurt this much." That's when I realized. He never wanted this. Not really. He didn't want to share me. He didn't want to see me with someone else. He wanted to feel chosen again. He wanted to test how far I'd go to reignite something we'd both let fade. He wanted to see if I'd say no, if I'd fight for us, fight for him. But I didn't. I said yes. Because I was tired. Because I was empty. Because I thought this was the only way to matter again. And now, all that remained between us was this invisible wall. Thick and tall and impossible. He stopped sitting next to me on the couch. Stopped eating dinner at the table. He left earlier for work. Came home later. Slept on the edge of the bed without turning his back to me, but without facing me either. I wanted to scream. Shake him. Tell him I did it for us. That I thought it would fix something. That I was just trying to feel alive. But I didn't. Because the truth was too ugly. And I wasn't sure even I believed my reasons anymore. We were broken before. But now, we were hollow. I had given him what he asked for. And in doing so, I'd taken away the one thing he didn't know he still needed, the belief that I still belonged only to him. And the worst part? He never said it out loud. But I saw it in his eyes every time he looked at me. He would never see me the same again. Did I do this to save my marriage or destroy it? That question sat with me everywhere I went. In the kitchen while I stirred coffee, I no longer wanted to drink. In the shower, where I scrubbed my skin until it turned red, as if I could wash off what I'd done. In the quiet hours of the night, staring up at the ceiling, replaying everything second by second. I told myself it was meant to bring us closer. That maybe by shaking something loose, we'd find our way back to each other. But the truth was, some things, once broken, don't fall back into place. They scatter. And you're left standing in the middle of the mess, not knowing what to pick up first. The guilt clung to me like smoke. Thick, invisible, but always there. And no matter how much I tried to scrub it away, it stayed. I'd sit at the table with my hands in my lap, listening for his footsteps, hoping he might talk. He didn't. He stopped sleeping in our bed. Started taking his pillow to the guest room, without a word, like it had always been that way. And somehow the silence became its own language. Louder than shouting. Colder than indifference. But the hardest part was that deep down, beneath all the shame and confusion and pain, I couldn't deny what I felt that night. With Mark, I felt seen. Not as a wife. Not as a mother. But as a woman. Someone with desire. With a body. With a heartbeat. That terrified me. Because it shouldn't have taken someone else to remind me I was still alive. It should have been him. The man I built a life with. But it wasn't. And that truth tore through me every single day. One afternoon, as I was folding laundry in the living room, Emma, my daughter, walked in. She hovered in the doorway for a second. Then asked, softly, "Are you and Dad okay?" It hit me like a punch to the chest. Because no matter how much we tried to keep it from them, kids always know. They feel it in the pauses. In the tension between words. In the way hugs become shorter. In the way eye contact disappears. I forced a smile. Said, "We're just going through something." She nodded, but her eyes didn't believe me. And then she left. Quiet. Careful. Like she didn't want to break anything else. That night, I stood outside the guest room door for almost 20 minutes. Hand raised, ready to knock. But I didn't. Because I didn't know what I would say. Sorry? He wouldn't believe it. I love you? He wouldn't feel it. Please come back? He already had one foot out the door. So I walked away. And cried in the kitchen. Alone. The way I always seem to end up. I kept asking myself, was it worth it? Those fleeting moments of being seen, being wanted, being touched, were they worth the crater it left in my home? In my children? In him? I don't know. All I know is, I said yes. And I don't think I'll ever be able to undo what followed. What would you have done? If the person you loved, the one you built a life with, raised children with, shared years and quiet dinners and tired mornings with, looked you in the eye and asked for something that shook the ground beneath your marriage, would you have said no? Would you have said yes? Would you have walked away before the silence turned to desperation? Because I thought I was choosing connection. I thought I was choosing us. But maybe I was choosing not to be invisible. Have you ever made a choice that you thought would heal, but only wounded deeper? A decision that made sense in the moment, but in hindsight, chipped away at everything you were trying to protect? I want to know. Because I don't have all the answers. And maybe, just maybe, someone out there has felt what I felt. Please, share your thoughts in the comments. I'm listening. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold, so you never miss a story that cuts straight to the heart. Because sometimes, the heart speaks in silence. And sometimes, the things we agree to in desperation leave wounds that take a lifetime to heal. My husband had a wish. And I said yes. But now, I wonder if saying no would have saved us both.